the earliest arrival of Europeans in the Americas, the question of when Aboriginal inhabitants arrived in the New World has always been pondered.
On October the 11th, 1492, the soon-to-be-styled Admiral of the Ocean Seas, Cristoforo Colon, landed on San Salvador, Samana Cay, and almost immediately encountered its soon-to-be exterminated Aboriginal inhabitants, the agricultural Taino. About these populations, he posed a series, or more likely members of his entourage, posed a series of questions which in one way or another we've been asking ever since. First of all, who are these people? Secondly, from whence did they come? Third, via what means did they get here? Fourth, and probably most vexatiously, when did they initially arrive?
In 1933, Edgar Billings Howard made a discovery at Blackwater Locality No. 1 near Clovis, New Mexico, that many people thought answered that very question. Directly below a layer of Folsom points, a finely made stone point with a long flute channel that was associated with Pleistocene bison, Howard discovered a layer with not as finely made, thicker stone points with a shorter flute channel in association with mammoth remains. Up until this time, Folsom points, which were a very finely crafted projectile point with a long groove along the center called a flute, should have been the oldest points found. The less finely made stone points with shorter flute channels were named Clovis points, since they were discovered near a town of the same name. These points were seen by many as evidence of the earliest North American inhabitants. This would become a widely accepted theory. Clovis supporters thought that, beginning at the latest 12,500 years ago, people had come to North America.
The idea was that sometime around 12,000 calendar years ago, the makers of these points came by foot across the Bering Land Bridge and within a mere 500 radiocarbon years sprinted to the tip of South America, killing off 35 genera of Ice Age animals in an orgy of killing the likes of which the planet had never seen.
This was referred to as the Clovis First Blitzkrieg theory of peopling. For several decades, most archaeologists believed that this was an accurate time frame in which Native Americans arrived in North America. In November 1955, a discovery was made by an amateur archaeologist that would eventually revolutionize all existing theories concerning the roots of human habitation of North America. Albert Miller of Avella, Pennsylvania, had always thought that finding Native American artifacts was thrilling. On the land that Albert and his brother Delvin owned, there was a cliff face with a small overhang made up of sandstone. Albert had always suspected the rock shelter of Native American habitation. One day, Albert walked through the site and found a newly dug groundhog hole. In the hole, he found burnt bone, flint, and at about 30 feet below the surface, a complete Native American-made knife. Knowing the site would be quickly destroyed by pot hunters, he concealed the site and kept quiet for 18 years. In 1973, Albert was guided to a professional archaeologist named James Adivasio. Before long, Adivasio would drive the first nails into the Clovis First coffin. Even though he hadn't started out trying to disprove the Clovis First theory, he had definitive carbon-14 dating labs saying that the stratigraphic samples they had taken from layers that contained human evidence in them were predating the Clovis First theory. This site came to be known as Meadowcroft Rockshelter. Meadowcroft Rockshelter has been put in the National Registry of Historic Places and has been named a National Historic Landmark. In this site, they have found flint flakes, blades, blade cores, carbonized plated basket fragments, early points, bone tools, bifaces, and most important of all, a projectile point deemed the Miller-Lanceolate point. The Miller-Lanceolate point, named after Meadowcroft's discoverer, Albert Miller, was the first pre-Clovis projectile point found at Meadowcroft Rockshelter. Since the Clovis first theory had been accepted for many years, this pre-Clovis evidence wasn't easily accepted. Dr. Vance Haynes was one of the Clovis first theory's main supporters and Meadowcroft's main opponent to the pre-Clovis evidence at Meadowcroft Rockshelter. Haynes and other pre-Clovis supporters believed that patches of coal or vitrinized wood, a type of fossilized wood like coal, had contaminated the dating with particulate. Since there is a patch of vitrinite above the rock shelter, the opponents tried to prove that it had dissolved and then flowed down the hill in water and built up over the years. The opponents then took samples and tried to dissolve it in every substance available in the lab they were working in, including solvents, acids, and basics. After these long series of tests, they found they could not dissolve it, therefore proving it was not the carbon in these substances and that the pre-Clovis evidence was correct. This whole charade was not even relevant considering after thorough investigation of the samples they sent in for carbon dating, there was not enough coal particulate in it to contaminate the samples. After numerous inquiry that dug the Clovis supporters deeper into the ground, many people started to join the pre-Clovis revolution. Much more evidence has arisen why it would not be possible to have migrated to America only 12,500 years ago. For one, linguists say that from the time the Clovis theory says Homo sapiens migrated to America to the time Columbus landed would not have been enough time to develop the over 900 languages of the Native Americans. The development of languages is just one of the many reasons why the Clovis theory has been proven wrong and the carbon dating samples taken at Meadowcroft Rockshelter are correct.
Now bear in mind, since the excavations in Blackwater Draw in 1933, more than 500 archaeological sites in North and South America had been claimed to have been older than Clovis. Each one of them had a very similar history. First, you'd see it in a local newspaper, then you'd read about it in a technical publication, then something would be found to be wrong with it. Every time one of those sites disappeared, it reinforced the Clovis first model.
Because of good funding, Meadowcroft Rockshelter had many luxuries that at the time were expensive, but therefore led the reform of all excavations afterward.
One of them is methodologically. One of them is based on the fact that the kinds of things that we did to excavate and document these materials represented, and still in some cases represent, what are widely considered to be the most rigorous excavation and documentation protocols that exist for caves and rock shelters. The other is substantively, we have a record of human visits here, 16,000 years long, against a very subtly changing environmental matrix that lets you look very carefully at changes, some minor, some not so minor, and figure out how humans are adjusting to those changes. And then lastly, it's obviously older than many sites had been up to the time this was excavated.
Meadowcroft Rockshelter was originally opened to the public in 1993 when the John Hines History Center took over the site. In 2007, the site was closed to the public for renovation and was reopened in 2008. They now had a lighting setup which, when desired, could light up certain areas of the site to show visitors where things happened or certain areas where things were found or dug. In the near future, there are no plans for extensive digging or renovation. The only digging plan is to keep stratigraphic layers visible and to take requested samples, which they will do when the need arises. They plan to keep raising awareness of our earliest North American ancestors and maintaining the site for generations to come, whilst continually trying to convince people that it would be impossible to have come across from Asia only 12,500 years ago, proving that pre-Clovis evidence is correct.